Hello everyone, this is Darsonovia here. It's been a while since I've talked about A Song of Ice and Fire. I haven't had the time to review this particular book, considering the fact that I have been busy with school, but I'm going to review the fourth book of the series, A Feast for Crows. This is the fourth book in the series. In case you were wondering, if you haven't seen my previous videos on this, I suggest you watch those first. There will be spoilers. Now, this isn't new to anyone who's read these books as they were coming out, but for those who haven't read these books yet, A Feast for Crows was originally part of a bigger novel, A Dance with Dragons. Now, rather than do what he's currently doing with Winds of Winter, George R. R. Martin has split it into two books. The first part of the book takes place, mainly focuses on King's Landing, the Iron Islands, and Dorne, while A Dance of Dragons focuses on everything else. This is the reason why this book is not as popular as the rest, because this doesn't feature characters like Daenerys, Jon, Tyrion, Davos, Stannis, and various other characters that people are interested in. And as a result, this is people's least favorite book in the whole series. Now, what do I think of this book? I'll get to that later in the video. A Feast for Crows takes place right after A Storm of Swords. So, literally, right where the last book leaves off. Then again, I'm going to say this so I don't have to repeat it when I do my Dance with Dragons review eventually, which also takes place right after A Storm of Swords. Now, the storylines that are in this book are Jaime, Cersei, Brienne, the Prince of Dorne, along with a few other characters. This book, if you read it, you'll notice if you've watched the show, there is a lot of differences, especially with Euron, how the Dorne storyline, turns out. Now, despite the fact that most people who've read this book, this is their least favorite, I don't know. I really like this one, to be honest. A Feast for Crows, we got a chance to read about, characters that we don't normally read about, like Brienne, as an example. All we know from Brienne is through Jaime's and Catelyn's point of view chapters. Now that this book gave us a chance to actually read, Brienne's thoughts as she's adventuring in the Riverlands looking for Sansa, we get to learn more about Brienne as a character. And I feel like this book, has given this character depth. Depth that her show counterpart lacks. There's a lot more to her than this badass feminist. Nothing against feminism, but Brienne's show counterpart is pretty shallow as a character, unlike her book counterpart, who is forced to make a decision towards the end of this book. Spoilers for those who haven't read the books, that Lady Stoneheart forces her to choose the sword or death. Why? Well, Lady Stoneheart is mentioned a lot in A Feast for Crows. And you don't really see her very much until the end of Brienne's last point of view chapter. What did she agree to, and what is Brienne planning to do with Jaime Lannister? Well, we won't know until Winds of Winter. So, unfortunately, this storyline is left in a cliffhanger. Now, Jaime's storyline. Again, like Brienne, his storyline in this is drastically different from his show counterpart. And I argue that this part of the book is probably my favorite. Because, we get to read about what Jaime, how he deals with, having his hands cut off and how he deals with the after effects of the death of his father and Joffrey. And unlike the show, there's a lot more tension between him and Cersei. And I'm not talking about a sexual tension. I'm talking about a real tension where he doesn't see Cersei the same way as he did before. And Cersei and Jaime aren't as close as they once were in this version. The reason I'm bringing this up because a lot of the people who are going to watch this video have only seen the show and haven't read the book. Now, for the Dorne stuff, I thought was fascinating. What are they up to? What is their plans? This is what was intriguing to me when I was reading the Dorne chapters. Any chapter involving Dorne, I devoured. It's like, wow, this is so interesting. Because, unlike the show, I'm not even going to talk about the Dorne storyline in the show. That was fucking bullshit. But the Dorne story in the book is fascinating, considering what they have planned. And towards the end of the storyline in this book, it makes me hungry for more. It's like, who would have thought a nation that's barely mentioned in the books becomes one of the most interesting with just a few chapters? I'm interested in reading more about Dorne. I can't wait to read A Dance with Dragons and A Winds of Winter when it finally fucking comes out anyway. Now, the storyline in the Iron Islands. What do I think of this? Unfortunately, like the Dorne storyline, there isn't that many chapters. But what little we do get with the Ironborn is fascinating. Because unlike the show, I know I keep bringing up the show a lot, you don't just have two people, fighting for the crown of the Iron Islands. There's like multiple people, which is more realistic in that kind of culture. And Euron, he's a character within himself. His first appearance in here made me interested in him. I can't wait to read more about Euron. Even though he has no point of view chapters, I am intrigued by this character. Unlike his show counterpart, who's essentially an R-rated version of Captain Jack Sparrow. Yeah, not an interesting character. In the books, he is. And reading more about how the culture in the Iron Islands, how it works and how it functions, we only get a brief glimpse of that in Theon's chapters and A Clash of Kings. But we haven't read anything about the Ironborn since A Clash of Kings, at least as I'm reading this series. So reading this, it made me more invested. I think this is the reason why George R. R. Martin has trouble finishing this series, because how much stuff he added to his world, which is this book alone. Of course, Samwell's chapters, if I had to be honest, I think they're my least favorite. Nothing against Samwell. It's just I don't find his chapters as interesting as everything else. Arya's storyline, a vast difference from the show, which I can't really comment on it fully because Arya's chapters are so far in between. Same thing with Sansa. But I thought they were pretty good. Now, why am I mentioning the storylines of each of these characters unlike the previous books? Because I feel like with so many storylines going on in this series at this point, I have to mention them. Now, is A Feast for Crows good? Is it worth your time? Well, if you plan on reading the whole series and you want to be caught up with the series before A Winds of Winter, you're going to need to you're going to have to read this book just like the others. How much happens in this book? I think quite a bit happens. Even though we don't get to read about the main characters that we're used to reading about, like Daenerys, Jon, Tyrion, and everyone else, I still think this is pretty good. It gives us a different perspective on the world of Westeros, which we didn't get in the other books. And dealing with the aftermath of the Red Wedding and the Purple Wedding and the everything else from the point of view of, various characters throughout Westeros, is interesting. I can't wait to finish A Dance of Dragons. I'm currently reading it. I can't tell you when I'm going to review it because these books are fucking long and packed with content, and it could take me a long time to get through it, not to mention with school as of this video. Like the other books, I consider this a classic. I think it's good. I think anyone that is a fan of good fantasy books should definitely continue reading A Song of Ice and Fire books. If you enjoyed the first 3 books, I don't think you'll be disappointed. And if you have watched the show, you may actually enjoy this a lot more, considering how vastly different this is compared to Season 5 of Game of Thrones. And you may understand why book readers, why they think the Dorne storyline in the show is a disgrace. But then again, everyone who's watched the show hates the Dorne storyline. But that's a topic for another time. This is Darcenovia, over and out. Next time I review this series, we'll get to the latest book. Hopefully, by the time I review A Dance with Dragons, Winds of Winter will be out, but I'm not going to count on it from George R. R. Martin. Have a good day, everyone, and have a nice day.